everyone, and welcome to Making the Best of It, a daily video series helping you make the best of your time at home. Today we are going to be making tensegrity structures. So these are amazing. I've been making them all day and my mind is still blown. The only thing like holding these two sides together is string, and somehow it still stands up. These are super cool, amazing structures, and I'm going to show you how to make one today. Now, it's important to understand that this is not magic, it's physics. We actually have two very important things working together to make this happen, tension and compression. So tension is when you pull something apart, and compression is when you push it together. For example, on this piece of string, I can pull it apart and it's really strong. So in tension, string is strong. But in compression, it's really, really weak. So in our structure here, all of these strings are actually in tension. They're all being pulled apart, and the only compression is happening on these little cardboard L's. Now that you understand a little bit more about how this works, keep watching to see how to make your own. For this project, you'll need some hot glue, cardboard, some scissors, a pen, a ruler, a needle, and some kind of thread or yarn. I'm using a yarn needle and some yarn because it's easier to fix mistakes if you accidentally tie something too tight or too loose. Cat feet and tail are optional. Once you have all of your supplies, the next step is to cut out two equally sized squares of cardboard. I'm cutting out two 4-inch by 4-inch squares of cardboard, but surprisingly, there are a lot of different ways to make tensegrity structures, and so you don't actually have to make it the same size that I am making my pieces of cardboard. In fact, you can even make this type of structure with different shaped bases. So you could make a triangle base if you wanted, but if this is your first time making a tensegrity structure, I would recommend following along pretty closely. After you have your two matching base pieces, the next step is to start making the L's. Now again, you can actually cut these into different shapes if you would like to. There's some really cool examples that I'm going to post in the description of other tensegrity structures. But what I'm doing is just these pretty simple L's, and I'm going to make 4 of them by using the first one that I cut out as a pattern to trace the other 3 so that they're all the same. The next step is to take your L's and glue them into pairs. So take 2 L's, stack them on top of each other, make sure that they're facing the right direction so that everything is all even, and then just use a little bit of hot glue to stick them together. The reason we're doing this is because this bit of cardboard is going to take a good amount of compression, and we want to make sure that it doesn't bend. So by adding an extra layer, we're helping make it a little bit stronger. Take one of your L's and one of your bases and glue the shortest side of your L to the center of your base on the edge. So since my bases are 4 inches by 4 inches, I drew a small little dash at 2 inches, and that is where I'm going to be gluing my L to. Once you finish the first one, take the second L and the second base piece and glue those together. You want to be sure to glue the exact same part of the L to each base. So double check to make sure that you have your L's in the same orientation if the different legs of your L are not exactly the same length. Then you'll need 4 small scrap pieces of cardboard to use to make supports for these L's. I am taking these 2 small scrap pieces of cardboard and cutting them in half to make 4. Once you have your 4 small pieces of cardboard, bend the top just a little bit and the bottom just a little bit. We're going to use these little bent pieces on our cardboard to glue it to our structure. It's going to go in kind of diagonally the way that I'm placing it right now, and we'll put a little bit of hot glue on either end and put it into place so we have a diagonal strut. You're going to do this twice to each of your bases, so each L should have 2 supports, and then we'll move on to the next step. Once you have your L's all supported, the next step is to take some yarn and cut 5 equal-sized strings. Now these strings are going to be the ones that go on the edges of your structure as well as in the middle. Make sure you cut them long enough so that your structure looks the way that you want it to. The next step is to put your 2 bases in the correct orientation. It should look something like this, where the L's are kind of facing each other with a gap between them. You can use something to kind of support them and try to keep them in the correct position. I found that actually wasn't super useful for me, but maybe you have something that fits a little bit better. Then you'll need to thread your needle and get ready to connect your bases to each other. Now I am using a big yarn needle, so they're not really very sharp, but they are large enough to fit the yarn. To do this next part, you could also use something to poke a hole in the bases and just push the yarn through with your fingers. Now one more time, this is what the correct orientation of the 2 bases looks like, so make sure that yours look like this and that you remember what this looks like so that you put together your tensegrity structure correctly. The next step is to connect the 2 sides of your base with a piece of string. Now you can see here that I checked to make sure my pieces are in the right orientation, and then I pull the needle and thread through one side and then push it through the next side, and once the string is joining the 2 sides, I'm tying a knot on just one of the bases. The reason we're leaving the other one open is so we can use it to adjust the tension in each of the strings to make sure that everything is balanced correctly at the end. Notice that I tie a double knot to make sure it doesn't come loose. Repeat this for all 4 corners of your tensegrity structure. After that, we need to tie the second side of each of our pieces of yarn. And so what you want to do is get it so that there is a nice little gap between your 2 L's and hold it in that position while you tighten down this piece of yarn to get it as tight as possible. The great thing about using yarn is that because it's going through the cardboard, it doesn't really move very much once you let it go. So you can kind of let the whole structure go if you're using yarn through cardboard, and then tie a double knot here. This side, the tension that you put right here, is going to be the reference for all the other sides of your tensegrity structure. For this next step, you're going to keep the orientation correct while trying to pull that string that you just tied tight so that you can tie the second string to have the same tension as the first string. This step is a little bit easier if you have a second pair of hands, so if you have a friend around who can help, it might be a good time to ask them. You'll do the same thing to the 2 strings on the opposite side of your tensegrity structure, but be very careful to keep the strings on the back side of your structure nice and tight while you tie these knots. At one point, I did realize that I was having trouble keeping my L's from colliding with each other. Remember, I said that we want to have a little bit of space between those L's because we need to put another string there. So you'll see at some point in this sequence that I go back in with some scissors and I cut out the parts of the L's that are causing the problem. And that's a totally okay thing to do. Now the last string that we're adding is the string that goes between our 2 L's. So it's a little bit hard to see in the section of the video where I'm actually tying the knots. So this center string right here is that my thumb is near. That's the one that we are going to be adding in next. Go ahead and thread your needle and get ready to add in this last piece of string. Because the cardboard on our L's is doubled, it is a little bit tricky to get the needle through it, so please be careful as you do this step. You're going to do the same thing that you did on the bases, where you're going to put it through both sides and only tie it on one for now. Now it is time to tie our very last knot. So as you do this, you want to make sure you pull this center screen as tight as possible. The tighter this string is, without, of course, breaking your cardboard pieces, the better your tensegrity structure is going to hold up. So again, if you have a friend around who can help you with this step and can help you keep the structure in shape while you tighten and tie it, that can be helpful. If you find that your tensegrity structure is not able to stand up, try to be patient and carefully balance it, and hopefully it'll stand up. If it still doesn't stand up, you may have to go back through and adjust the tightness of some of the strings that you tied on there, but with a little bit of patience, you can definitely get it to work. The final step is to go through with some scissors and cut off the extra pieces of yarn that are hanging off of your tensegrity structure. So this is what my finished structure looks like from the side. You can see that it looks like it's kind of levitating, and even if I press down on it with my finger, it still stays stable and doesn't fall over. I can even put a little bit of weight, something like some scissors, and while it does take a little bit of effort to make sure that everything is balanced, it can actually hold some weight, which I thought was pretty cool. I actually made this structure just a little bit too good though. When I wanted to show you what it looks like when it falls down, I couldn't get it to fall down. So here is my first attempt at a tensegrity structure, and it's a little bit less pretty and a little bit more wobbly, but you can see that when I knock it off balance, it falls completely flat, and then I can pick it back up, and as long as I balance it right, it'll stand right back up. Great job today. Hope to see you soon. Bye.